The letter came in a plain white envelope, the kind you almost throw away thinking it's junk mail, until you see the red text stamped across the top. Final notice. Coverage terminated. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Medical coverage cancelled. Balance due $12,347.68. I just stood there, frozen in my kitchen, holding the envelope like it had personally betrayed me. My stomach clenched so hard it felt like something inside me folded in half. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. It had to be a mistake. Camille promised she'd handled it. My name is Lorenzo Vega. I'm 28 years old, I live in a cramped apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I've been juggling double shifts for over 2 years. Working night ER rotations as a nurse in training and weekends at a walk-in clinic in downtown. Camille was my wife. She's 32, whip-smart, charismatic, the kind of woman who could convince a locked door to open with a smile. We met in Texas while I was finishing my undergrad in nursing, and we got married fast. Fast like summer thunder. You hear the rumble, you feel it in your chest, and then boom, you're already inside the storm. She got offered a fellowship in Europe just after we married. A journalism grant in Barcelona. It was too good to pass up, she said, and it'd be temporary. 6 months max. We agreed I'd stay behind, finish nursing school, and she'd handle some of the bills remotely, specifically, my medical insurance. She had the international account, the time difference made it easier, and besides, she said, you're doing the hard work. Let me handle the logistics. At first, it worked. We'd FaceTime every night. She'd send cute videos of her exploring Spanish markets, sipping espresso on little balconies. She always looked effortless, European. But then the calls slowed down. The time zone got tricky. She was just so swamped with deadlines. My gut twisted, but I told myself not to be clingy. I was working 60+ hours a week and barely sleeping. I didn't have time to spiral. Until this letter arrived. I sat down at the kitchen table. Just a wobbling piece of IKEA laminate I'd salvaged from a neighbor's trash, and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed her name into our bank app, the joint one we used for shared bills. The last insurance payment was 3 months ago. The rest of the account was bleeding transactions. Boutiques in Madrid, dinner in Ibiza, even a charge from some spa in Montreux. Thousands gone. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. This wasn't an oversight. It was a choice, and I had no idea what to do next. The first thing I did was text her. Hey Camille. Just got a letter from UnitedCare. Says the policy's cancelled. Did the auto payments stop? Let me know. I kept it calm, polite, like I wasn't already spiraling inside. No response. So I called. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail, her voice chirpy and composed. Hey, it's Cam. Leave it sweet, leave it short. I didn't leave a message. I hung up, waited 20 minutes, then called again. Nothing. The next morning, I checked her Instagram. She'd just posted a boomerang from a rooftop pool in Madrid, sunset spilling gold across the skyline, a cocktail in hand, her perfectly polished nails tapping the side of the glass. The caption? Finally learning to breathe again, dizzy #self-care. I stared at it for so long my phone dimmed and locked. Self-care. That phrase hit me like a slap. I hadn't had a full day off in 6 weeks. The last time I slept more than 4 hours in a night was. I couldn't even remember. My hands shook so often during blood draws I'd started telling patients I had light caffeine tremors, when in reality, I was just running on fumes and resentment. And yet, for the past 2 years, I had covered everything else. Rent, groceries, gas, my student loan interest, and Camille had just one job: pay the damn insurance. She chose it. She insisted. Let me do my part, she said. And now? Now I was looking at a notification from the hospital payroll system that said the emergency room wouldn't let me pick up any more night shifts without verified coverage. Liability rules. I was officially locked out of half my income. Just like that. I sat on the edge of my bed, in the room that still smelled faintly of Camille's lilac conditioner, trying to figure out whether this was gross negligence or intentional. Because here's the thing about Camille. She was always 5 steps ahead. She never forgot things. This was the girl who once found $70 in lost crypto because she kept a paper backup of her 12-word passphrase in a book spine. Nothing slipped by her. So what changed? It was subtle, the way all big fractures start. First, she stopped asking about my schedule. Then she started sending late replies, weirdly short and full of "I'm so busy, talk soon" texts. When I asked how the fellowship was going, she'd say, "Complicated. Political. But exciting." Never specifics. And when I brought up bills, only once or twice, she'd pivot fast. "Don't worry about it, babe. You already do too much. I got this." Those words echoed now, taunting me. I went back into our joint email inbox and searched for UnitedCare. The last confirmation email for a payment was dated October 3rd, nearly 4 months ago. I checked my spam folder. Nothing. Camille hadn't even tried to hide it. Why? That question sat in my chest like wet cement. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge. Nothing but oat milk, a shriveled lemon, and half a container of hummus. I laughed. Not a real laugh. The brittle kind that comes when you realize you're the only one still pretending everything's fine. That night, I boiled instant noodles, ate standing up, and stared at the photos on the wall. One was from our wedding, barefoot on the beach in Galveston, sunburnt and deliriously happy. She wore a flower crown. I wore rolled-up chinos and a linen shirt I couldn't afford. We said we didn't need anything fancy, just each other. I guess I took that part seriously. I looked at the photo and whispered, "What the hell happened to us?" But I already knew. This wasn't just about insurance. It was about feeling abandoned by someone who promised to build a life with you, and realizing they've already started building it somewhere else. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan creaking slowly above me, the letter from UnitedCare sitting on the dresser like a threat I couldn't look away from. I kept thinking, maybe there was an explanation. Maybe something went wrong with her account. Maybe her phone got stolen. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. I kept inventing excuses for her, stacking them like sandbags against a flood I already knew was coming. The next morning, I emailed the insurance company directly. They replied in under an hour. The policy was canceled due to non-payment. The account holder, Camille Vega, received 3 notices and 1 phone call. The final invoice was sent on December 11th. 3 notices. 1 phone call. She knew. I sat there reading the email over and over, letting the weight of it settle in my chest. Camille had known for over a month that my health insurance was gone. And she hadn't told me. No warning. No heads up. Nothing. That same afternoon, I got a text from my boss at the clinic. "Hey, Lorenzo, HR needs updated proof of insurance to keep your weekend shifts on the schedule. Let me know when you've got it sorted." Sorted. As if I was just late filling out a form. I thought back to the promises Camille made before she left for Spain. "We're a team," she said, holding my face in her hands the night before her flight. "I'm going to chase this opportunity, but I'm still yours. I'll make sure you're okay. Always." I believed her. God, I wanted to believe her. Back then, I saw her as fearless. She spoke 4 languages, wrote op-eds that got published in The Atlantic, had a passport full of stamp. Meanwhile, I was grinding through anatomy flashcards in a windowless classroom and working 12-hour ER rotations. She made the world feel big. I made it feel survivable. Maybe that imbalance had always been there. I just didn't see it until it threatened to crush me. I opened her Instagram again, against my better judgment, and scrolled. There was a new story. She was laughing, her curls falling over her eyes as she danced on a cobblestone street with 2 other women, all of them wearing matching white coats and red scarves. Flamenco music played in the background. The caption said, Last night's assignment turned into a celebration woman dancing, #MadridNights. Celebration. Meanwhile, I was microwaving leftover rice and Googling low-income healthcare options Minnesota. It hit me then, not just the betrayal, but the utter disregard. She didn't forget. She didn't panic and hide it out of shame. She simply didn't think it mattered enough to tell me. That's what broke something in me. It wasn't the money. It was the realization that I could disappear under a pile of bills, or a medical emergency, or pure exhaustion, and she wouldn't even notice until her rent was late. That night, I pulled out a legal pad and started writing down every payment I'd made since she left for Spain. Rent, groceries, the co-pays I'd fronted for a couple urgent care visits before my coverage ran out, gas, utilities, the shared phone plan, even the Spotify account we still split. I did the math. Over $19,000 in the past 12 months. All from my account. All without help. And now my insurance, the one thing she promised to handle, was gone. I stared at the total and felt something in me shift. Like a rope finally snap. It wasn't just a missed payment. It was a pattern. And I was done pretending not to see it. 2 days later, I stood at the pharmacy counter with a bottle of antibiotics in my hand and a pit in my stomach. I'd caught something nasty during my last shift, a sinus infection, maybe strep. My head throbbed, my throat felt like sandpaper, and every joint in my body ached. But what really knocked the wind out of me wasn't the fever. It was the price. Without insurance, this will be $147.93. The pharmacist said, not unkindly. I blinked. 410 pills. She nodded, already moving to the next patient in line. I paid for it. I didn't have the strength to argue. When I got home, I opened my banking app and saw the number I'd been avoiding. $326.17 left in checking. Rent was due in 4 days. My car, an '09 Corolla with 180,000 miles, had a brake light on again. I sat on the edge of the bathtub in my tiny bathroom, holding the pill bottle and trying not to cry. I wasn't supposed to be here. I'd played by the rules. I'd studied, worked, sacrificed. I'd held Camille's hand through her panic attacks before job interviews, read every article she wrote, stayed up late to help her edit. I kept us afloat when she said the fellowship wouldn't cover all her expenses and sent her money without asking why. And now I was sick, broke, and sitting in a $600 a month apartment that smelled like my downstairs neighbor's vape juice. I texted Camille again, even though every part of me screamed not to. I'm sick. Pharmacy said the insurance is still inactive. Can you please explain what happened? This time, she responded. I told you, I thought it went through. I've had issues with my bank here. You don't have to attack me over one mistake. One mistake. It felt like someone had poured gasoline over my chest and lit a match. It's been 4 months, I wrote back. And I found spa charges and boutique receipt. You had money. You just didn't use it for us. The 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then nothing. I stared at the screen for 15 minutes waiting for a reply. None came. That's when I knew it wasn't going to be fixed. Not by her. Camille wasn't the person who stayed up all night writing in our first apartment, curled on the floor with a mug of tea and a dream. She wasn't the woman who cried during Obama's farewell speech and said, "We have to do something good with our lives." Somewhere along the way, maybe in Spain, maybe before, she'd let that part of herself rot. And I'd been the idiot watering a dead plant. I opened a new tab and searched Free Legal Clinics Minneapolis Health Insurance Fraud. Because now it wasn't about saving the marriage. It was about saving myself. I didn't hear from Camille for almost a week after that. No calls. No texts. Not even a double tap on the message I sent. The silence said more than words ever could. And in that quiet, I started remembering all the moments I'd ignored, signs that now, in hindsight, felt like red flags waving right in front of my face. Like when she told me she couldn't send money for the holidays because of currency transfer issues, but then posted pictures of herself skiing in the French Alps. Or when I told her about my cousin's funeral and she didn't even ask which cousin. Or when I showed her my final exam score, a 98 on my trauma rotation, and she replied, "That's great, babe. Can you Venmo me for the Spotify again? Mine won't go through here." It wasn't just the money. It was the subtle erasure. The way she'd slowly pushed my life to the outer edge of her orbit, while keeping the benefits of our connection, literally and emotionally, tethered to her comfort. I kept looking for the woman I married, but all I saw was the person she'd become. One morning, I woke up to an email from the insurance company. It wasn't a bill this time. It was a warning of legal escalation if the balance remained unpaid. They were threatening to send it to collections. And my name, though I wasn't the policyholder, was attached as an authorized participant, meaning it would hit my credit score. I forwarded the email to Camille. "You need to deal with this today. It's your name on the policy." 5 hours later, she finally responded. "I'm doing the best I can, Lorenzo. I've had a lot going on. Things here aren't easy either." Then she sent a selfie. A literal selfie. Her in a cafe, smiling weakly over a cappuccino, captioned, "Burnout is real." I stared at that photo like it was in another language. I was skipping meals to stretch my groceries, sleeping in the break room between shifts, falling behind on classwork because I couldn't afford new textbooks, and she was sending filtered selfies and blaming burnout. That night, I walked into the free legal clinic on Lake Street. It was cold out, February in Minneapolis cold, the kind that bites through your jeans no matter how many layers you wear, and I remember thinking I shouldn't have to be here. I'm not the one who messed this up, but I was the one paying for it. The receptionist handed me a clipboard and told me to wait. My fingers were shaking, but not from the cold anymore, something deeper. Something like grief, maybe. The slow, suffocating kind that creeps in when you realize the person you loved isn't coming back. When my name was called, I stood up and followed the lawyer into her office. She was in her 50s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense voice. Her name was Meredith Chen. She listened as I laid it all out, how Camille was the policyholder, how she stopped paying, how I was left without coverage and now faced collection threat. She didn't say anything for a long time. Just took notes. Finally, she looked up and said, "You may not be liable for the full balance, but if your name is linked, we can't wait. We need to act. You've got a potential case for negligence or financial misconduct, especially if she had the funds and deliberately let it lapse." Misconduct. That word hung in the air like a gavel. I nodded slowly. Meredith slid a packet of papers across the desk toward me. Intake forms. Release of information. Authorization letters. "Do you want to pursue this?" she asked. I looked down at the stack. It felt heavy, like it carried not just paperwork, but a decision I couldn't take back. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm done waiting for her to care." Filing the paperwork with Meredith felt like crossing a line I'd spent months tiptoeing around. It wasn't just legal. It was emotional, like finally admitting to myself that the version of Camille I kept hoping for, the partner, the teammate, the woman who used to trace circles on my back when I couldn't sleep, wasn't coming back. Maybe she never existed the way I thought. That weekend, I didn't go into the clinic. I couldn't. My shifts were suspended pending insurance reinstatement, and the director told me, gently but firmly, "We just can't have the liability, Lorenzo." "I'm sorry," I said. "It's okay," but it wasn't. Not even close. I spent Saturday night on my living room floor with an old laptop and a stack of unopened mail. Medical invoices, utility bills, bank statements. It looked like a financial autopsy. I made a list of every missed opportunity one could remember, things I hadn't done because I was working extra to float us. Conferences I skipped, friends' weddings I couldn't afford to attend, trips home to Texas I postponed again and again. At the bottom of the list, I wrote in all caps, "Things I gave up for Camille." Then I crossed out her name. Things I gave up for someone who wouldn't do the same for me. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. Then I made a new list, one I'd never written before. Things I want for myself. It was small at first. Basic. A full night's sleep, health insurance, finish school without debt, a job with benefits, peace. And then something deeper. To stop explaining my worth. To stop asking to be prioritized. To stop living like I'm optional. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not yet. Not my friends, not my professors, not even my mom, who still called once a week from San Antonio to ask, "Mijo, estás comiendo bien?" But inside me, something had started to settle. The way a bone does after a fracture. Still tender, still raw, but aligned now. Camille texted me the next morning. "Hey. I've been thinking. I know you're mad, but I didn't do this to hurt you. Things got messy here, and I didn't want to burden you with my problems." I stared at the message for a long time. Burden me. As if I hadn't already been carrying both of us for 2 years. I typed back. "You didn't burden me with your problems. You buried me in silence." Then I deleted it. Not because it wasn't true, but because it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need her to understand. I needed to move forward. Instead, I replied, "I've started handling things on my end. You don't need to worry about it anymore." Her reply came fast. "So you're cutting me out now? After everything?" Everything. I closed the chat and put my phone face down. I didn't owe her my breakdown anymore. I didn't owe her my recovery either. Some people will only value your help when it's no longer available. And some lessons they have to learn without you. That night, I applied for 3 scholarships, 2 emergency relief grants, and a part-time research position with the nursing department. I didn't know if any of it would come through. But for the first time in months, I felt like the next step belonged to me. It took less than a week for Camille to shift from guilt to anger. She started with small jabs, passive-aggressive texts, vague emotional bombs. "It's just crazy how fast you're willing to throw everything away. You say I don't care, but you're the one turning cold." The last one hit harder than I wanted to admit. I sat with that word cold for a while. Was I? Or was I just finally refusing to bleed for someone who didn't even show up with a Band-Aid? The truth is, I didn't want to be cold. I wanted to be done. But she didn't make it easy. A few days later, she messaged again. This time with a long paragraph, the kind you can feel her pacing while writing. "I'm sorry, okay?" Things spiraled and I didn't know how to fix them. I thought I had more time. "You don't understand how hard it's been for me here. I've been dealing with burnout, homesickness, and now this. I never meant for you to get hurt. But cutting me off like this? That's not fair." I read it 3 times, waiting for it to feel sincere. It didn't. Because nowhere in that entire message did she ask how I was doing. Not once. It was all about her stress, her confusion, her fear of being abandoned, not the fact that I was the one left with hospital bills and a suspended job. I almost didn't reply. But then I realized something. She wasn't writing to fix things. She was writing to control the story. And I'd been part of her story for too long. I replied with one sentence. "I think you're more upset about losing access to me than you are about what you did to me." She didn't respond after that. Not for a while. But others did. A mutual friend, someone we both knew from school, messaged me out of the blue. "Hey man, just wanted to say I heard what's going on. Camille's been venting in our group chat. Sounds rough." I blinked. Venting? Apparently, Camille had been painting the whole situation as a tragic long-distance implosion. Miscommunication. Emotional distance. A failure to adapt to time zones and cultural change. No mention of the money. The unpaid bills. The legal letters. Just vibes and heartbreak. At first, I was furious. But then, I wasn't. Because for the first time, I could see it clearly. Camille needed an audience. I needed closure. 2 very different things. I messaged back. "Thanks for reaching out. I'm not angry. Just moving forward. Hope she finds what she's looking for." He never replied. That night, I got an email from the university's Emergency Assistance Committee. I'd been approved for a partial hardship grant, $2,000 toward medical debt and an additional $1,500 in textbook and tuition credit. I sat in silence for a long time, just looking at the numbers. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was something. A crack in the ice. I logged out, leaned back, and whispered to no one. "You're going to be okay." And this time, I believed it. The call came on a Thursday. Unknown number. Minnesota area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Lorenzo? This is Pastor Milton." I sat up straight. Pastor Milton had married Camille and me 3 years ago in a quiet backyard ceremony in Austin. I hadn't spoken to him since. "I got a message from Camille," he continued gently. "She asked me to check in on you. She's worried." Worried. The word landed like an insult. I didn't know whether to laugh or hang up. Instead, I just said, "Did she tell you why she was worried?" There was a pause. "She said you're shutting her out. That you're hurting. That things are, quote, getting hostile." Hostile. I looked around my tiny living room, the silence loud enough to make my ears ring. The stack of unpaid bills. The printout from the clinic's legal department. The list of shifts I'd lost. And now I was being cast as the aggressor. "She didn't mention the insurance," I said flatly. "Or the months of silence. Or the hospital bills in my name." Pastor Milton was quiet for a long moment. "She said things got complicated over there. That she didn't mean for any of this." I didn't respond. "She still loves you, Lorenzo," he added softly. "She just doesn't know how to fix it." And that's when I said something I didn't even know I'd been holding inside. "I don't want her to fix it." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I want her to acknowledge it. But fixing it? No. That's my job now. For myself." Pastor Milton didn't argue. He just said, "I'll pray for you both," and hung up. A few hours later, Camille texted me. "So now you're dragging church people into this?" I didn't answer. She followed up. "You really want to ruin your reputation over this? Make everyone think I'm the villain?" That word again, villain. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't scared of what she did. She was scared of how people would see her now that I wasn't playing the quiet, exhausted husband anymore. It wasn't guilt. It was image control. The following Sunday, I got a call from my cousin Lena in San Antonio. She was close to Camille back when we lived there. Sisters by marriage, they called each other. "Camille says you've blocked her," she said, voice tight with concern. "She's really upset." I didn't dodge this time. "Lena, I got dropped from my insurance during flu season while working in an ER. She knew and said nothing. And now she's upset I told the truth." Lena exhaled into the phone. "She didn't tell me that." "No," I said. "She usually doesn't." After that, the messages from mutual friends slowed. The sympathy posts faded. The group chats quieted. And I realized something. When you stop being useful to people, their loyalty gets real quiet, real fast. But I also realized something else. I was okay with that. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't losing sleep over who was disappointed in me. I was finally figuring out who I was when I wasn't busy being the support system for everyone else. The next morning, I sat in Meredith Chen's office, a folder of documents open between us. She wore reading glasses low on her nose and underlined things as she spoke. "You're not powerless here, Lorenzo," she said, tapping a page with her pen. "Camille was the policyholder. You were the listed dependent. But more importantly," she flipped to another sheet, pointing at a bank statement. "She used joint marital funds for personal gain while neglecting shared responsibilities. That's breach of fiduciary duty. You have a case." Hearing it phrased that way felt strange, cold, legal, but also clarifying. It wasn't just a marriage that fell apart. It was a contract broken emotionally, financially, and now, possibly, legally. "I'm not trying to destroy her," I said. Meredith looked up at me. You're trying to reclaim what's yours. That's not destruction. That's survival. She slid a small packet toward me. Inside, a draft claim for reimbursement, documentation of the unpaid balance, and a formal request for arbitration. It wasn't a lawsuit yet. It was a warning shot. Once we file, Meredith added, it'll go to her officially. Not through text. Not through guilt trip. She'll have to respond. I nodded. My hands were steady this time. That night, I sat at my desk and reread everything. I thought about the version of me from a year ago, overworked, sleep-deprived, calling Camille at 3 a.m. just to hear her voice. I thought about the night I skipped my final lab exam to send her money because she said her card wouldn't work at a pharmacy in Spain. She never paid me back. She never even asked how my exam went. And here I was, still rebuilding from the fallout. Before I went to bed, I opened my notes app and wrote something simple. You don't have to burn the bridge to walk away. But you do have to stop building it alone. The next morning, I got an email from Meredith. Arbitration papers served. It was done. No more text. No more begging for closure. No more explaining why I deserved better. I wasn't asking anymore. Later that week, I returned to the hospital, not to work, but to submit new insurance documentation. The hardship grant had opened the door, and with Meredith's help, I'd applied for Minnesota's reduced-rate coverage for low-income medical workers. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Fully mine. The HR rep smiled and stamped the paperwork. You're all set, Lorenzo. You're back on next week's schedule. I stepped out into the cold February sunlight, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was dragging my own body through someone else's mess. I felt like I was finally walking out of it. I didn't tell anyone when I got my shifts back. Not my mom, not my friends, not even my academic advisor. I just showed up on Monday morning in clean scrubs, swiped my badge, and clocked in. Back to the ER. Back to the noise, the adrenaline, the hours that vanish in a blink because you're holding someone's life in your hand. I'd missed it more than I realized. The chaos felt honest, something Camille hadn't been in a long time. That night, after a 12-hour shift and a cold chicken wrap from the vending machine, I collapsed into bed and slept for 9 straight hours. No anxiety dreams. No 3 a.m. texts. Just sleep. Real, dreamless sleep. The kind you don't get when your life is on fire. Over the next few weeks, I started showing up differently. I started leaving my phone on silent, not because I was avoiding anyone, but because I no longer waited for an apology that wasn't coming. I joined a study group I'd been too busy for all semester. Applied for a small scholarship. Said yes to a Friday night trivia invite with my classmate. I didn't drink. Just sat at the table, soaking in the feeling of being around people who didn't need something from me. One of my instructors, Dr. Rowley, pulled me aside after class. Your clinical work has improved dramatically, she said. I can see you thinking less and trusting more. I wanted to tell her why. That it wasn't a study technique. It was because I'd finally put down the weight of someone else's chaos. Instead, I just smiled. Thank you, Dr. Rowley. The arbitration hearing with Camille never happened. Her lawyer, some expat legal consultant from Spain, sent Meredith a counter-proposal. Partial reimbursement. No admission of wrongdoing. Just a quiet agreement to avoid escalation. I took it. Not because I was backing down, but because I didn't need revenge. I needed closure. The money helped. It paid off the insurance balance, gave me enough to cover my textbooks for the next semester, and left just enough to fix the Corolla's brake. But what meant more was the silence that followed. No more text. No more guilt-laced voicemails. No more being cast as the villain in a story I didn't write. Just space. Space to breathe. One evening, I went for a walk around my block. Cold air slicing across my face, my hands buried in my jacket, and realized something small but undeniable. I liked who I was becoming. Not because I was healed, but because I was healing on purpose. And no one could take that from me again. I found out through Lena, Camille's cousin, the only one who hadn't picked a side, just quietly stayed in orbit, relaying updates without judgment. She moved back to the States, Lena told me over the phone. Last month. Barcelona fell through. Fell through. She lost the fellowship. Something about not turning in her final feature. They gave her 6 months of pay and no renewal. I didn't say anything. Just listened as Lena filled the silence. She's back in Austin. Living with her sister. Working part-time at a local magazine. They don't pay much. Still, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not cruelty. Just calm. Lena hesitated. She asked me not to tell you. Why are you? Because she's not the only one who matters, she said simply. Later that week, I checked Camille's Instagram for the first time in over a month. Not because I missed her, just to see if the narrative had shifted. The rooftop cafes were gone. No more sunset parties, no trips, no soft focus burnout is real posts. Instead, she'd posted a blurry photo of a takeout box on her lap, captioned, "Trying to find balance again." There were no comments, no heart emojis, no endless strings of "you got this babes" 2 hearts. Just silence. The algorithm had moved on. I shut the app and haven't opened it since. Meanwhile, my life was accelerating. I got offered a summer internship at the hospital I'd been shadowing, a paid one with a foot in the door for a post-graduation job. My advisor told me I was top of the candidate pool. I was invited to speak at a student mental health panel about work-life boundaries in clinical programs. For the first time in 2 years, people weren't asking me to sacrifice. They were recognizing me. Respect, not pity. I used part of the reimbursement money to buy a second-hand bike. Started riding again in the mornings before shift. It felt good, wind in my face, city waking up around me, my body remembering how to move without strain. The silence Camille left behind didn't feel like an empty space anymore. It felt like mine. One morning, I got a call from my mom. "Mijo," she said, "you sound lighter." And I was. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. But because for the first time, the weight I carried was mine, and only mine. Spring came late that year. The kind of Midwest spring that still bites at your ankles even when the sun's out. But there was something about the cold that felt less threatening now. Like I'd survived worse. Because I had. Finals were approaching. My schedule was packed, clinical rotations, study sessions, back-to-back shifts, but I wasn't breaking under it anymore. My body was still tired, but my mind felt clear. Focused. I wasn't surviving out of obligation now. I was building something for me. One morning, I passed a bulletin board in the nursing school hallway. A flyer caught my eye: post-grad placement program, full benefits, relocation support, guaranteed employment. I tore off a tab without hesitating. A year ago, I wouldn't have even looked. I was too tethered to someone else's emergencies. Too buried under guilt disguised as love. But I'd stopped measuring my worth by how much I could endure for others. Now I measured it by what I gave myself permission to pursue. The lake near my apartment had finally thawed, and on a rare free evening, I walked there with a thermos of cheap coffee and just sat, watching the water ripple with the breeze. No music. No phone. Just quiet. I thought about Camille. Not with bitterness. Not even sadness anymore. Just clarity. I had spent so long waiting for her to remember the version of us that once felt invincible. But sometimes people don't forget. Sometimes they outgrow it. Or abandon it. Or replace it with something shinier until it stops reflecting what they want. And that's okay. Because I hadn't forgotten who I was. I was the guy who pulled double shifts to pay tuition. Who cared for patients when no one else would. Who made breakfast from scratch every Sunday morning, even when there was barely anything in the fridge. I wasn't broken. I was just tired of proving I deserved better. And now, finally, I had it. A few days later, I received an email from the placement board. I'd been matched with a trauma unit in Portland. Competitive salary. Signing bonus. Benefits. I sat with it for a while. Then I smiled. And said out loud to no one, I'm going. Not running away. Not escaping. Just moving forward. Later that night, I unblocked Camille's number. Not to text her, but to let go of the last little string of resentment. She could live her story. But mine? Mine was just getting good.